I have spent a good deal of time over the course of 30 plus years as a student of history, of theology, of political science, asking the question, where did civilization go wrong? At what point did that whole cycle of weak men, bad times, strong men, good times get started? Is it even possible to stop it, to break the cycle? This is especially urgent today as we see increasing revolutions in technology and anti-culture thought experiments deepening the depths of bad times perhaps beyond any recovery. If we manage to achieve another cycle and peak, is it even possible to stay there? For the purposes of modernity, we would have to start with the Renaissance era and the rediscovery of archaic sources and ideas. It takes a few centuries, but the Renaissance revives the mummies of so many bad liberal ideas of antiquity that we end up with the age of revolutions, the paleo-communism of Jacobinism, the French Revolution. Bonaparte draws it back slightly, but then goes institutionalizing and spreading many revolutionary concepts. All of this finally gives birth to the era that gives us World War I. World War I is the event that finally shattered people's faith in a religious sense, as well as their confidence in old loyalties and old ways. While the radical traditionalism of fascism and National Socialism in the wake are a resurgence of old ideas in some form, they are still intentionally anti-monarchy, anti or indifferent to Christianity, and promote new loyalties apart from church or class. While a bit of refreshment in the desert of spreading Marxism, they indicate less a return to before the era of corruption and more of a reactionary rejection, albeit correctly, of Marxism and the Bolshevik direction of modernity. Having been victorious in World War II, at present day Marxism has spread itself throughout the globalist cult culture to infect far beyond economics and history, but intrudes into sexuality, race, and through constant programming via the hijacking of all forms of so-called education and the degeneration of what were once the arts. Of course, this is obvious to anyone with common sense, an increasingly rare virtue Americans were once known for. But by starting at the Renaissance, we can see the very long swing of the cycle of bad ideas, weak men making hard times, though there have been dozens or hundreds of smaller pivots in various places in that same time frame. Can we break the cycle of history? For that, we must go back well before the Renaissance. If the rediscovery of ancient ideas sets all this decadence into motion, what about those ideas in antiquity? Liberal ideas are and always have been poisonous. That's the lesson of history. And it's always through becoming soft, physically, psychologically, and emotionally. Surely the first humans to fence in their fields to keep the food they produced for their family had to bear with some girl in their clan whining about their poor neighbors. Simplistic as that sounds, it's no different than the liberal faction of the Roman Republic, elite senatorial class people wanting to give away the privileges hard-earned by their ancestors to those that didn't work for it and didn't deserve it. The almost extraterrestrial experiments the Greek city-states did in imaginative, unique, different ways of living produced many of these poisons of liberalism. They only overcome these self-imposed weaknesses by Macedonian strength and struggle and imperialism. But their thoughts, put down to paper, passed down in their own history, continue to plague the Roman Republic, and so the rest of the world in the future, thanks to the Renaissance. One might reasonably conclude that the founding of civilization itself, requiring rules and laws, leads naturally to the inevitable co-birth of those who wish to be lax about rules and laws. Hence, we have an answer to the question, could this have been prevented long ago? No. Theoretically, though, there is something we can do. It isn't enough to create strong institutions. Wherever there are people, those will tire out and become weak. We would need to create a deliberately ordered way of life patterned on keeping men strong and ostracizing liberal weaknesses immediately. But then, time remains the apex predator, and people will inevitably fail at some point to uphold the system. Though we could certainly give it a better effort than ever before, armed with the warnings of history, we are likely doomed to repeat the cycle for as long as humans exist. Certainly that should not give us over to despair, though. There are things we can do in those limited times and places where that situation pivots, where the cycle reverses and changes. We're all under an obligation for our family, our nation, our way of life, our faith, to do the best that we can to preserve it, to recover it, at this point, to stop the complete slide down into the muck and depravity of globalism.